Last week we began painting Maugan Ra, the Eldar Pheonix Lord and founder of the Dark Reapers aspect. He stood alone against Hive Fleet Leviathan and emerged victorious, and then helped to hold the line against Hive Fleet Kraken. After using a variety of methods ranging from layering to washing, we were able to complete the bone detail found all over his body. This week we will be completing this miniature, painting the cloak, armour, silver details, and soul stones. This was a challenge to pull off, but in the end we will finish with a great product worthy of display or action on the tabletop. This is Cursed Crusader Arts. After looking at the intended colours for the box art, I found myself modifying them slightly after becoming inspired by Death from Darksiders 2. Death's colour palette has many similarities to Maugan Ra, making heavy uses of deep blues and rich purples. We can use a basic understanding of hot and cold colour theory to ensure that our project remains consistent. Our cold tones will come from the blues used on the Armour and Cloak, and we can contrast this by taking advantage of the yellows we used last week for the bone to add some warmth. Finally, we can use purples, reds and magentas all blended together on the inside of the cloak and the hair on the banner that will balance the two other major colour components. To accomplish this vision, we can begin by painting the outside of the cloak with a layer mixed from 2 parts Nagaroth Night and 1 part Cantor Blue. Our second layer is made from 1 part Cantor Blue and 1 part Abaddon Black. This is to be applied into the deepest folds of the cloak to create a contrasting shadow that we can blend. Just be careful not to add too much Abaddon Black at once, as we still want to see some of the blue. A useful way to help with this is to refer to your pot of Drakenhof Nightshade. When you look at the pot of liquid, it appears to be almost black. However, when the light catches it in a certain way, you can see the blue tint. Our third layer is made by adding more Cantor Blue to the second layer, which is then added between the previous layers, blending them together to make a distribution of light and colour across the whole cloak. Once this is dry, we can edge highlight or dry brush with pure Cantor Blue. This will help to add more light to the miniature, whilst also taking advantage of the texture left by the dry brush. After this, the whole cloak is washed with Drakenhof Nightshade. We could leave the cloak at this point and call it finished, but instead we can dry brush and wash a little more to attract the viewer's attention to the face. We can do this by dry brushing the hood and the top half of the lower cloak with a mixture of 1 part Cantor Blue and 2 parts Thunderhawk Blue. And then 1 more dry brush of pure Thunderhawk Blue can be done around the hood only. This can then be smoothed out with 1 more wash of Drakenhof Nightshade, completing the outside of the cloak. To paint the inside of the cloak, we start by mixing 1 part Nagaroth Night with 2 parts Screamer Pink. This would act as our first layer on the inside of the cloak, whilst also brightening it to create a strong contrast with the outside blues. Pure Screamer Pink was used as our second layer, and then a third layer was made with 1 part Screamer Pink and 1 part Mephiston Red. With the inside of the cloak quite bright, we can push the colours back with a wash of Carroburg Crimson to enhance the red tones. Once it is fully dry, we can darken it by using a second wash, this time using Drakenhof Nightshade. Whilst the second wash is still wet, we can take a small amount of Screamer Pink and use it on the higher surfaces, wet blending it with the wash. We can use the same recipe with the hair on the banner. This will help to tie the top and bottom parts of the miniature together. My next task was to finish the base. To the unpainted rocks, I applied a layer of Eshin Grey followed by a layer of Dawnstone. I tried to use greys closer to the colder side of the spectrum to contrast with the rest of the ochre base. This would complement the main parts of the character, such as the outer cloak, weapon and armour. If you would like the greys to look a little colder again, you could add small amounts of Thunderhawk Blue to help neutralise the yellow pigments in your grey paints. After this, a general and heavy wash of Nuln Oil was applied all over the grey, intentionally staining the rocks with black patches. Adding further splotches of Bale Tan Green and Seraphim Sepia washes will help to sell the illusion of moss growing on the rocks or natural colour and light variations. Finally, a dry brush of Codex Grey can be used to help us pick out any edges on the stone surfaces and leave tiny scratches on them. The hardest part of this miniature was the black armour and his weapon, the Morgitor. This is not a strong point for me, but eventually I was able to produce something acceptable. Mixing 1 part Thunderhawk Blue with 1 part Abaddon Black, we can dry brush this loosely onto the pure black armour and weapon, allowing the edges and some of the elements of the flat surfaces to pick up this new colour. I then mixed 1 part Abaddon Black with 4 parts of Contrast Medium, using it to dampen the brightness of the dry brush. This should leave a faint highlight on the miniature whilst ensuring that the armour remains black. If you have a recipe for painting black armour or any other element of this miniature, leave a comment below so that we can all learn and improve on our skills. With Maugan Ra almost completed, it was time to address the armour plates showing the silver skulls that are synonymous with the Dark Reapers that follow him. We can apply a layer of lead belcher to set our base colour, and then follow this up with a layer of Runefang steel. This will brighten up the silver to an extreme level, which will help it stand out against the other dark colours that we have already used. Once the metallic paint is completely dry, we can use a wash of Dragonhearth Nightshade to add a cold colour filter to it, connecting it with the outside of the cloak. For deeper definition, I purposely added extra layers of the wash to the deepest parts of the metal armour plates. All of the main components of this miniature are now complete, and with a little extra time we can finish the gold details on the weapon, as well as the red, greens and blues for any soul gems that we may come across. Overall, this was a fun and dynamic miniature to build and paint, and was a great introduction to the Eldar after years of Chaos Space Marines. I hope you enjoyed this guide and found some useful tips to use on your own miniatures. If you'd like to see more painting and conversion guides, subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. Next week, I'll be releasing the footage from the Diablo 3 Treasure Goblin that will complete the build from the OSL video, and I'll see you next time on Cursed Crusader Arts.